The PlayStation era of Japanese RPGs is fondly remembered by many of us. It was what many consider to be the golden age of Japanese RPGs, and with all the quality titles that are on the PlayStation, it is hard to argue that fact. There were so many opportunities and chances for developers to reach an audience that they had never reached before. Square Enix had released Final Fantasy VII, which popularized the Japanese RPG here in the West, and many people wanted games much more similar or very similar to Final Fantasy. This opened the gateway for developers who had never considered localizing their games outside of Japan to finally have an opportunity to reach a brand new audience. It also spawned many developers to take it upon themselves to try to create the ultimate Final Fantasy VII killer. Because of this, studios and companies were more willing to take a risk than they ever were before. And one such game to come out of that was Legend of Legaia. Published by Sony and created by a studio called Procyon, they would go to create a unique Japanese RPG that, in my opinion, still stands out to this day. Legend of Legaia tried to blend two genres together, that being of a Japanese turn-based RPG and a fighting game. Whether or not they were successful, we're going to find out in this review, but there are many of us who fondly remember Legend of Legaia. It has a cult following for a reason, but is it a game worth checking out? Is it a game that you need to go out of your way to play in this day and age? Well, sit back, relax, subscribe to the channel, and let's find out as we review Legend of Legaia for the PlayStation 1. Legend of Legaia's story is a bit of a mixed bag. It's definitely not a bad story, but it didn't even break any new grounds back when it was first released, and the older that this game gets, its story definitely shows its age. That doesn't mean there's not some emotional moments that are going to make you feel bad for some of the characters, or some very surprising moments or dark moments inside the game, because those definitely exist. But it's not going to be a game that is going to define history with its amazing story. That being said, let's talk a little bit about its story and its characters. Humans and Seru live together in harmony. Serus provide humans with thriving technology such as transportation, wherein a Seru would provide humans with strength far superior to their own, allowing them to become stronger. This all changed when the mist appeared. The Seru began to attack humans, and those humans who wore Seru would turn into monsters, controlling the human and possessing them. The mist started to take over the land, making travel impossible. This left many villagers to find ways to protect themselves against the mist. Our story starts out with our protagonist Vaughn as a resident of Rim Elm. Rim Elm is a village hidden behind a wall, keeping the mist at bay, and most importantly, creating a barrier between them and the Seru so they could not break through. Vaughn has finally turned the rightful age to join the hunt and venture outside the walls to fight and protect the city. As he goes to bed on the eve of the hunt that would transpire, he would change his fate forever. The Seru would break down the wall, allowing the mist to get in, and Seru would invade the city. Vaughn made his way to the Genesis tree, where he awakens the Raw Seru meta. A Raw Seru is a being who is able to resist the effects of the mist. With the help of the villagers, he's able to purify the Genesis tree and rid the town of the mist. Along the way, you'll meet up with a girl named Noah, who was raised by a wolf on top of a mountain, and Gala, a warrior monk from Biron Monastery. The mist seems to be a phenomenon that just started and is one of the many mysteries that will be uncovered throughout the game. Vaughn acts as the silent protagonist, the avatar for the player. Your opinion on this may vary depending on how well you like the silent protagonist archetype. Noah was a girl raised by a Raw Seru named Tara who attached herself to a wolf. Because of this, she lacks knowledge of the world and is very naive. She is always curious about situations, and it can be very awkward at times to hear some of her dialogue. Gala is probably the most interesting. His parents being killed by a Seru, he despises them. Accepting the power of the Raw Seru, Ozma, he is hesitant to do so. He still attaches himself to the Raw Seru to use its power because he does have a desire to save the world. I applaud the efforts put into making what are basically accessories attached to the characters and give them so much personality. While I find Meta and Ozma interesting, it is the relationship between Noah and Terra which I really came to appreciate. Whereas the other two characters just met their Ra Suru when they acquired them, Noah has known hers since she was a baby, giving her this attachment and motherly dynamic the other two do not have. The villains do pop up pretty late in the game, but I'd say there is a payoff to setting it up this way. I'll let you explore it for yourselves. While there are elements of Legend of Legaia's story I can appreciate, its real meat and potatoes comes from the combat. As it stands, no RPG has ever really tried to attempt this again. The blend of combining a fighting game and turn-based RPG into one combat system. This gives it a giant standout among its Japanese RPG contemporaries, so let's break down the combat and see just how well the game does at executing this unique concept. The battle menu is broken down into 4 categories: attack, magic, spirit, and item. Each of these are selected by pushing that direction on the gamepad. Items work exactly as you expect them to. Select an item, watch your character get healed, or have their status effects removed. Magic works much the same way as you would expect, but does have its own unique touch to gameplay. We will elaborate on this later. Spirit allows the characters to take less damage and also gives them the added benefits which we will get to momentarily. For now, let's focus on the attack command. Pushing left on the D-pad will let you pull up an attack menu. Right off the bat, you will notice a couple of things here. A bar towards the bottom of the screen with 4 directions: up, down, arm, and arm, representing left and right. After acquiring a Ra Suru, one of the arms will be replaced with the Ra Suru option. By pressing the direction pad on the D-pad, you'll see a bar at the bottom of the screen fill up with commands. This indicates how many moves you're able to combine into a combo. Once the bar is full, you'll be given a chance to select the moveset. You'll spend quite a bit of time playing around with these options, learning new arts. Arts are special moves that are exclusive to each character, and they will have multiple they will be able to learn. Think of these much like combos in a fighting game. Once you learn an art, it will be stored in the menu for you to refer to later. By using Spirit, you can forfeit your next turn and extend the bar towards the bottom of the screen, allowing you to chain up even more attacks on your next turn. This will also give you a defensive boost, which will become crucial later on in boss fights. Also, by using Spirit, you will be able to do longer combos or chain combos together. Another determining factor in using a combo is the amount of AP you have. AP is accumulated by attacking and using Spirit. You will also be given some AP as you attack or as you get attacked. If you lack AP, you won't be able to use that specific art. Instead, you'll just combo a bunch of attacks together, still doing damage to the enemy, but not nearly as much as you would while using an art. It's going to be up to you to find and strategize when and how to chain up combos together and use Spirit. This is quite addicting and becomes an obsession to unlock each available art. This leads me to my first gripe of the game though. You'll be able to use super arts which combine a few regular arts into one combo, allowing you to do one massive art for serious damage. However, super arts do not appear in the list of moves your character is able to use, meaning you'll either have to write them down or memorize them. It's annoying and would have been a nice touch to have them appear in your list. The game at least does save the last commands your character did, giving you that option to write them down for a later use. Magic does function very similarly to other Japanese RPGs, but how you acquire them is very different. Spells function more like monster capture style in a Shin Megami Tensei game or Pokemon. You'll be able to capture various Suru monsters for magic. Once captured, you'll be able to summon them in use for battle. The game even ties these into the plot by stating that Ra Suru can enslave the Suru and control it once it has been captured. Each Suru will be able to level up to a maximum of 9. The more you use them, the more they level up. Each level will make their magic stronger or add new things to it. Take the first healing spell, for instance, you get Vera. Each level it increases its potency of how much HP it will be able to heal, but will also remove certain status effects such as Venom, Curse, and Rot, while also healing you. This is nice, while say something unlike Final Fantasy, where you'll have to use a consumable plus a healing spell, taking up 2 turns, this only takes up 1. Some will also cast status effects on the enemy, which I found very useful to take advantage of early on in battles. I found it oftentimes useful to cast a magic spell that casted poison on a boss. It saved my bacon a couple of times. You do have a limit on how much you're able to use magic, and this is determined by how much MP your character has. Pro tip, save your MP and restorative items, as they are not super common during early stages of the game and can't be bought, and if they can, they come at a hefty price. How you obtain a Suru comes completely down to RNG. After attacking a Suru with an art or a regular attack and dealing the killing blow, you'll either kill them or acquire them for use. You'll know when you've succeeded in capturing them. By killing them, they will fade into the floor, and capturing them, they will disappear in a surrounding light. You'll instantly recognize which enemies can be captured and which ones can't, as Surus will have an element next to their name. Whether or not you want to take the time to get each character to learn every spell is entirely up to you. Catching the monster does come down to RNG. Some have higher success rates than others. Throughout the game, though, you will acquire an item called an Ivory Book. This will increase the success rate of capturing a Suru. I would at the very least get each of the characters all of the healing spells. The last thing in battle I want to touch upon real quick are status effects. Status effects play out the same as they do in any other Japanese RPGs except for one, this being rot. Rot will render certain limbs useless, making it so you can't use specific arts or use that specific limb during a combo, meaning you'll only be able to use the limbs that are not affected by rot, which can honestly be annoying. As usual, they can be guarded against by equipment that nullifies this effect. Something I enjoyed very much about the battle system was how much of an emphasis there was on strategy. Knowing when to heal, when to cast magic, and when to use spirit and guard are crucial to battle. There are a couple of bosses in particular that put me on the defensive, as his attacks were devastating, KOing Noah right off the get-go. I had to adapt to strategy, putting Noah mainly on the defensive and designating her as my healer so she was able to go first, and Vaughn and Gala for my offensive. This also adds the excitement of battle, as you have to determine whether or not using a combo for a decent amount of damage is a good idea or not, or if you'll need to use spirit to perhaps guard against a stronger attack. Like many other Japanese RPGs, Legend of Legaia will of course have some time wasters or mini games that you are allowed to participate in. Yes, Legend of Legaia still has that darned fishing mini game that has to plague every RPG ever created. They also have gambling mini games, which is also something common in RPGs, and you'll be able to participate in a slots machine where you'll be able to gain coins and spend those coins on various different items. However, the unique game specific to this is a fighting game where you'll have to chain up combos, kind of like you do with the battle in a way, but it plays out very differently. You'll use square, circle, X, and triangle to use different attempts and attacks to try and damage enemies. Certain enemies are weak to certain forms and combos, and you'll just have to figure out what those are. Using this battle will also get you coins, which you can also exchange for items as well. There is also the Colosseum-like battle where you will be able to fight various different monsters. I didn't spend too much time with this because I honestly didn't find them that much fun, and while they can be a good distraction from the main story and side quests, I feel the mini games just kind of got boring way too quickly. Let's talk about a few negatives and a few positives. First, the soundtrack is serviceable at best. It's not really bad, but it doesn't really stand out either. If I'm being honest, there were not really any tracks that were memorable. Even the battle theme was just there, and you miss the battle theme in your Japanese RPG, especially when it's the one that you're going to hear the most. That's one that's going to stick with people. That's one you need to get right. The soundtrack was composed entirely by Michiru Oshima, who would go on to compose various animes and movies as well as video games, her most prominent perhaps being Full Metal Alchemist. How you can go about creating a video game soundtrack like this that is so lackluster and unmemorable to going and creating what is probably one of the best anime soundtracks out there baffles me. She would also go on to work on music for Aiko, making some of the most beautiful tracks for that game. She tends to be very ambient with her musical design, and maybe that just doesn't fit with some of Legend of Legaia's more dark and depressing themes, but it's weird because Aiko also has those as well, and her soundtracks or her compositions add to the depth and emotion of that game. So perhaps her craft just got better as time went on. Though the soundtrack does not do it for me, the sound design is perfect. As you'd expect from a game that mimics a fighting game for its battle system, it sounds spot on. The hits, the precision, the when you punch an enemy, when you miss an enemy, it's very responsive, and you can hear like when the enemy blocks, when the enemy is a hit. It's a very satisfying sound, and it also gives you those cues to know when you did damage, as well as giving you those visual cues as well. It was just something that I really kind of appreciated. The graphics in battle also look really good, at least for its time. They really stood out among other Japanese RPGs and captured the feel of, say, something like Tekken would with its character models, adding to this feel of a fighting game the developers were going for. Movement on the field occurs at a slow pace, and it becomes increasingly noticeable after leaving a town or dungeon. Legend of Legaia is a very grind-heavy game, especially during the beginning hours, until you get all the characters and raw Suru. This can make some of the early boss fights annoying if you go in unprepared. It also doesn't help. Armor, weapons, and healing items are ridiculously expensive, and healing items are almost essential to survive for the first few hours of the game. Armor doesn't even get any cheaper, but sometimes it is just best to save your money and wait to purchase the weapons and armor in the next town, because the stat boosts and the amount of grinding you'll have to do doesn't really pay off for, say, something like 10 additional damage or 10 additional defense. The boss fights tend to be more about strategy anyway, or more about battle of patience. Whether or not you have extra defense from that missing piece of armor isn't going to make a big difference in how you fight a boss anyways. You're still going to have to focus on a healthy dose of offense and defense by healing, using spirit to defend, and healing to get through. It's really an illusion that sets up, oh, I need to buy that or grind for the newest equipment because it's available, but you really don't. Plus, you'll want to spend your money on Doors of Lights and Doors of Winds. Doors of Lights will let you leave dungeons, while Doors of Winds will let you visit towns you have already visited. I do want to put a major emphasis on something though. This game isn't just about being stronger than an enemy and being able to withstand their attacks by having high defense. There are a lot of bosses in the game that will give you clear indicators they are going to be using a strong move on their next turn. If you find yourself unable to beat a boss, it may be in your best interest to analyze the enemy and pay attention to their patterns or knowing their moves. Knowing when to use spirit to guard against an enemy, hit an enemy by pummeling them to death, or using magic on them, or just simply healing, is going to be crucial to winning battle. The game can be difficult, but it's not overly complicated. I love a good RPG that makes you think and plan ahead, anticipate, and execute. Gala is also extremely frustrating to use when you first acquire him. He is unable to use a basic 3-hit combo without charging spirit. This becomes increasingly frustrating when Vaughn and Noah at this point are able to do 5-hit combos after charging their spirit. It's also made worse by the fact that Gala cannot purchase weapon or armor when you first meet him, making him useless. On top of that, giving him a weapon he is not proficient in will make his left arm attack bigger, adding insult to injury. This basically makes him useless in fights and is accompanied by a rather annoying boss fight. I'm probably making this sound like a bigger deal than it actually needs to be, but I can see some people becoming increasingly frustrated with this on top of the heavy grinding already needed and the cost of healing supplies. Overall, Legend of Legaia is a very fun game. It's definitely not perfect, but one worthy of the cult classic status that many place upon it. Its unique battle system is more than satisfying and even to this day stands out amongst Japanese RPGs. Your willingness to play this game will depend on how well you can tolerate older game design and how much you prefer a slower but methodical battle system. It also does have PlayStation 1 visuals, and I know some people think that those are outdated and don't like the look of them, so the aesthetic design of it might be something that deters you from playing it as well. But if you're not one who particularly cares about the way those graphics look, it is still a game I heavily consider giving a shot. For me, this was an exciting journey back to the past. Replaying it again for the sake of this review, I enjoyed it just as much as I did the first time. If you are a fan of JRPGs, give it a shot. I've got no problem giving this my Gaming with Spoon's seal of approval. Legend of Legaia is definitely a game that is worth playing, and I really enjoyed my time with it. Replaying through this game again for the sake of this review only reminded me why I enjoyed it so much back in the day. Despite some hiccups and some flaws that I had with the game, I still find this to be a very satisfactory game to play. The graphics aren't going to be everybody's cup of tea. There are people who are going to see the PlayStation graphics and just can't get past them, and that's fine. But if you're looking for something that really tries to evolve the Japanese RPG or turn-based RPG battle systems into something unique, Legend of Legaia is a game that I recommend giving a shot. Its battle system alone is enough to make this a title worth playing. That being said, we will be reviewing Legaia 2 Duel Saga at some point on the channel. Yes, Legend of Legaia did get a sequel, which not many people seem to know. Legend of Legaia was already a small game, so Legaia 2 not being as successful kind of makes me wonder why. I have played it back in the day, and I did enjoy it, but I remember not enjoying it as much as Legend of Legaia, so we will be checking it out on the channel. As for the next game we are going to review on the channel, that will be Persona 5 Strikers. I'm very much looking forward to playing this game, and at some point this month, I also do want to tackle Assault Spy and Dusk Divers as well and get out reviews for those. We also have our Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys review that will be going up this month as well, so you guys have that to look forward to. That being said, let's continue to make this year a great year for Japanese RPGs in general. I have quite a few games lined up this year that I want to play, and I will now announce them accordingly as time goes on and my reviews start to come out. But very much looking forward to being able to share those opportunities with you guys. You guys know the drill. Facebook, Twitter, social media links, all that fun stuff is going to be down below in that description. Let me know down below what you guys thought of Legend of Legaia. Are you going to give this game a try? Have you given it a try and enjoyed it? Let me know down below. And most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.